When Dylan Wang chose Shen Yue over Bai Lu, Xiaojan's reaction left everyone frozen. The night was thick with silence when Dylan Wang finally spoke the words that would change everything. For weeks there had been whispers that his heart was torn, split between two names that carried different kinds of gravity, Shen Yue and Bai Lu. Both women had stood beside him in unforgettable moments. Both had been tied to him through countless dramas and unspoken feelings, but the world had been waiting for only one answer. And when it came, it struck like thunder through a quiet sky. Dylan chose Shen Yue. The scene unfolded in a way no one could have scripted. Bai Lu had been seated only a few feet away, her expression unreadable, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had spent days surrounded by speculation, caught in the storm of questions about where Dylan's heart truly lay. To see him now, standing tall yet visibly trembling, made her chest tighten with 1,000 emotions. The cameras were rolling, the set lights burned down on them, and every word carried the weight of a nation watching. Shen Yue herself seemed caught between disbelief and heartbreak. For her, this was not simply a declaration, it was a return to a history that refused to let go. She remembered the days when she and Dylan stood at the beginning of everything, back when the world first believed they were meant to be. Time and distance had tried to bury those whispers, but here he was, bringing them all back to life in front of millions. Her lips parted, but no sound came out, only her wide eyes that shimmered with a mixture of fear and relief. And then, just as the weight of Dylan's confession seemed too heavy to bear, Xiaojan stepped forward. The room grew still, so quiet that even the faint hum of the cameras seemed too loud. Xiaojan had been listening with an intensity that could not be hidden. Everyone expected him to remain silent, to let the storm pass over, but his reaction left the entire cast frozen. He looked directly at Dylan, his eyes sharp and filled with a quiet storm, then he shifted his gaze to Shen Yue. For a moment, no one breathed. The tension was electric, the kind that grips your chest and does not let go. Xiaojan finally spoke, and his voice carried a tremor that revealed more than words ever could. He said, "If you choose her, you must protect her, not once, not twice, but every time the world tries to tear her away from you. Because if you let her go again, do not expect her to survive it." The words echoed through the set like an arrow, piercing both Dylan and Shen Yue. The crew shifted uneasily, unsure whether this was part of the performance or something raw and painfully real that had slipped out into the open. Bai Lu lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly, as if Xiaojan's words had confirmed what she had feared all along, that this story was never hers to hold, that Dylan's heart had always been quietly pulled toward Shen Yue no matter how far he had tried to walk away. Shen Yue felt her throat tighten. Tears pressed against her eyes, but she fought to hold them back. Dylan reached out, his hand trembling as he tried to touch her, but she stepped back, leaving his fingers hanging in the air. She whispered his name, but the sound was so fragile it was almost carried away by the silence. For years she had dreamed of hearing him say the words he had just confessed, yet in this moment it felt almost unbearable, because the world was watching, because Bai Lu was breaking quietly in the corner, because Xiaojan's warning still hung heavy in the air. Dylan's voice cracked as he pleaded, "I cannot lose her. I cannot live pretending I do not feel what I feel. Every day I tried to silence it, but it never left me. I choose Shen Yue. I will always choose her, no matter what it costs me." His words were raw, unpolished, carrying every wound and regret he had hidden away. The set turned into a battlefield of emotions. Bai Lu finally lifted her face, her eyes shimmering, but she did not cry. Instead, she gave a faint smile, one that cut deeper than any tears could have. She whispered softly, "I always knew." And then she turned away, her footsteps echoing as she walked off the stage, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than steel. Xiaojan did not move, his eyes still fixed on Dylan, as if measuring the weight of his decision. His presence alone was enough to keep the moment hanging in the air like a fragile thread about to snap. Shen Yue stood frozen between them, her heart torn open for the world to see, her breath shallow as if she could not bear the choice that had been made in her name. For a long time no one dared to speak. The crew whispered in hushed voices, the fans online exploded with shock, and those who witnessed it firsthand knew they had just seen something that could never be undone. Dylan had made his choice. Xiaojan had spoken his truth. Bai Lu had walked away with her quiet heartbreak, and Shen Yue was left standing at the center of it all, unsure whether to embrace the man who had chosen her or run from the storm that had just begun. That night became a turning point. Clips of the scene spread across every platform, headlines blazed with words of confession, betrayal, heartbreak, and fate. Fans were divided, some celebrating the long-awaited return of Dylan and Shen Yue, others mourning Bai Lu's silent pain, and many replaying Xiaozhan's warning over and over, wondering what truths he had seen in their story that others could not. And in the middle of the chaos, Dylan sat alone, staring at his own trembling hands, whispering to himself that he would never let go again, even as the world questioned whether Shen Yue was ready to believe him. The silence that followed Dylan's confession was louder than any storm, louder than the cheers of fans, louder than the applause of cameras. He had spoken with a trembling voice, a voice that carried years of hesitation and hidden affection, and now the air was thick with emotions no one dared to break. Shen Yue stood frozen, her eyes wide, her lips parting as though words wanted to escape, but her heart refused to let them. Bai Lu was still in the corner, her gaze low, her shoulders stiff, her silence heavier than any cry she could have given. And then there was Xiaojan, standing just a few steps away, his face unreadable, his presence demanding attention, his very breathing making everyone hold theirs. The crew had stopped moving. The cameras, though still rolling, seemed to blur in the background as the cast and staff became witnesses to something too real, too raw, to be dismissed as fiction. Dylan's hands shook as he looked at Shen Yue, his eyes brimming with the tears he had tried so hard to keep hidden. Every ounce of his being screamed that he had made the right choice, yet the fear in his voice betrayed him. It was not a victory, not a declaration of triumph, but a confession layered with fear. He had chosen Shen Yue, but he was terrified of what that choice would cost him. Shen Yue finally blinked, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She wanted to move, to step forward, to say something, but her body refused to obey. Memories of every secret conversation, every glance that lingered too long, every quiet laugh they had shared in the shadows of the set came rushing back. She had waited for this moment, dreamed of it, feared it, and now that it was real, her heart felt as if it would collapse under the weight of it. Bai Lu's silence was unbearable. Every eye in the room flicked toward her, waiting, bracing for the explosion that never came. Instead, she turned her face just enough to reveal the glisten of tears she had been holding back. She was not angry, at least not in that moment. She was shattered. Her silence was not surrender, but an ache so deep it refused to give her the strength to speak. And in that silence, Xiaojan finally stepped forward. The room shifted instantly. Xiaojan was not just another actor, not just another star. He carried with him an aura of authority, a weight of presence that made even Dylan straighten his shoulders. He looked first at Dylan, then at Shen Yue, then at Bai Lu, and finally, back at Dylan. His expression was unreadable, his eyes sharp but not cruel, his lips parting slowly as if he knew the next words he spoke would be remembered for years. "You chose her," Xiaojan said, his voice low, calm, but laced with something that cut deeper than anger. "Do you even understand what that means?" The words hit like a strike. Dylan flinched, his tears finally falling freely. Shen Yue looked at Xiaojan with a mix of fear and respect, her breath caught in her chest. Bai Lu's head snapped upward, her eyes finally meeting his, as if she too needed to hear what he would say next. "This is not just about you," Xiaojan continued, stepping closer. "This is not about the two of you, or the three of you. This choice will echo far beyond tonight. Fans will see it. The world will see it. And the weight of it will not only fall on your shoulders, Dylan, but on hers too." He motioned toward Shen Yue, his voice hardening, his eyes never leaving Dylan's face. "Are you ready for that?" The question hung in the air like a sentence waiting to be passed. Dylan's hands clenched at his sides, his tears soaking his skin, his chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. He wanted to say yes, he wanted to declare his certainty, but the fear in his voice earlier betrayed him again. He was afraid, and Xiaojan had torn open that fear for everyone to see. Shen Yue finally found her voice, a whisper at first, trembling but unmistakable. "I never asked him to choose," she said, her eyes glistening, her voice breaking. I never wanted him to carry this weight alone. She turned to Dylan, her tears now unstoppable. Why did you do this? Dylan, why now? Why in front of everyone? Her voice cracked at the last word, the pain in her tone slicing through the silence. Dylan reached out instinctively, his hand trembling as he tried to bridge the space between them. Because I could not hide it anymore, he said, his voice shaking. Because every day I kept it inside, I felt like I was losing you piece by piece. I was afraid, Shen Yue, afraid to lose you forever. The confession was raw, unpolished, desperate. The crew shifted uncomfortably, unable to look away yet overwhelmed by the intimacy of the moment. Bai Lu's tears fell silently now, her face turned away, her pain too real to mask. Xiaojan remained still, his eyes studying Dylan with an intensity that made even the bravest tremble. And then, Xiaojan spoke again, softer this time, almost like a warning whispered into the night. If you are afraid to lose her, then you must be ready to lose everything else. The words struck like a thunderclap. The weight of them pressed down on everyone present. Dylan froze, his lips parting but no words forming. Shen Yue gasped softly, her heart thundering in her chest. Bai Lu's sobs finally broke free, uncontainable, echoing in the heavy silence. The cameras kept rolling. The lights kept shining. But the moment had transcended the set, transcended the script. This was no longer a scene being filmed. This was real, and everyone knew it. Dylan's tears fell harder now, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Then let it be everything. If losing everything is the price of keeping her, then I will pay it." Gasps rippled through the crew. Shen Yue's knees weakened, her breath catching as she clutched at her chest. Xiaojan's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a recognition of the weight those words carried. Bai Lu covered her face, her sobs muffled but heartbreaking. And in that moment, the set, the cameras, the world seemed to stop. Dylan had made his choice, and Xiaojan's reaction had turned it into something far greater than anyone could have imagined.